Chapter 1. A disturbing summons. I shall never forget the afternoon I received. Lady Minerva St. Clair's urgent telegram summoning us to Thorngate Hall. The message, terse and breathless, read simply, "Come at once, Sergeant MSc Poirot." And I arrived in the fading light of a late spring day. The long narrow lanes, lined with hedges, heavy with jasmine and hawthorn. The air was heady with perfume, yet beneath it lay something faintly sour, as if the earth itself harboured an unwholesome. Secret Thorngate Hall was a venerable estate of honeyed limestone, its facades bathed in the gold of dusk. Ivy clung to the walls like memories too stubborn to release their hold, while the ornate windows glowed with lamplit promise. At the entrance stood Lady Minerva herself, a vision in lavender silk, her face drawn and pale. In her gloved hand, she clutched a small, faded pouch, tied with a strand of ribbon half loosened inside. This pouch lay a handful of dried lavender whose scent, she claimed, foretold misfortune. "It is you alone, Mademoiselle Poirot," she began, addressing my friend with a tremor in her voice. No one else could understand. Cry most peculiar. I thought it a mere fancy of my aging mind, until yesterday. She held out the lavender pouch. The dried flowers within were greyed with age, but the fragrance was unmistakably. Sweet Poirot inclined his head, his moustaches quivering with interest. "Madame, pray, tell us everything from the beginning." His voice was gentle, yet possessed the quiet authority that never failed to command the truth. She led us through the grand oak doors into a panelled hall, where portraits of stern ancestors gazed down as if to judge her confession. "This pouch belonged to my grandmother, the late Duchess of Sharrington," Lady Minerva explained. "She carried it at all times, said it granted her solace during anxieties. When I inherited it, I thought it charming, a relic of feminine superstition. But 2 nights ago, I awoke to find it gone from my vanity table." I remember the sudden movement of Poirot's eyebrows, unspoken question. "And you searched everywhere?" "With my maid's assistance, yes. We scoured every room, every corridor. It vanished as though spirited away by unseen hands." She paused, pressing the lavender to her nose, as if to prove it real. "And then, yesterday morning, the butler found Lord St. Clair, my husband, dead. In his study, there was a gasp from would have expected any reaction from Hastings. But Poirot's composure was absolute. His death was not natural, I presume." Lady Minerva's eyes glistened. "A vial of poison, arsenic. According to Dr. Penfold, it seems my husband drank his morning eau de cologne, unknowingly laced with a lethal dose." She swallowed hard, the battle to maintain dignity plain on her face. "No note, no sign of forced entry. The only clue is that missing lavender pouch." As the household gathered constables, the family solicitor, and, to my astonishment, the local coroner Poirot moved among them with characteristic grace. Each face told its own story of shock and suspicion. I could already see in keen eyes that beneath this tapestry of grief and genteel decorum lay threads of deception waiting to be unravelled. Chapter 2. The first. Clues. The following morning dawned pale and portentous as Poirot and I reconvened in Lord St. Clair's study. A fine mist lay upon the lawns of Thorngate Hall, but inside the room the air was thick with curiosity and unspoken dread. The mahogany door stood ajar, its edge scuffed as though forced, but no lock had been broken. Poirot's keen grey eyes drank in every detail, the arrangement of furniture, the angle of the curtains, the glimmer of the fireplace grate. I, Hastings, followed closely, notebook in hand, ready to record whatever tidbit might prove crucial. The scene of Lord St. Clair's final moments greeted us with deceptive calm. His desk, a massive heirloom carved with fleur-de-lis, bore the neat array of papers he had been examining the night before. Correspondence regarding the estate's finances, a half-written letter to his solicitor, and a ledger that seemed untouched. At the centre, however, stood the dark eau de cologne bottle, its stopper missing, the contents sloshing at a disturbingly uneven angle. Poirot stepped forward, slender fingers fluttering like a bird's wing over the tabletop. "Observe, Hastings," he murmured. "The bottle lies at an angle suggesting it was seized in haste. But note the absence of a stopper on the floor. If this was placed intentionally for murder, why would the murderer remove it after the deed? One would think he might leave it to avoid suspicion." I knelt to inspect the carpet. "No stopper here, monsieur. I see nothing but these faint marks." I traced the carpet fibres where a small smudge of white powder clung stubbornly. "Could that be arsenic?" Poirot said softly, plucking a solitary fibre between his thumbnail. "Precisely, but the powder has transferred only here. Either the murderer wore gloves imperfectly, or he wiped his hands clean before leaving, yet neglected this small area." He tilted his head, letting the light catch the powder's telltale sheen. "This, Hastings, is our first clue." My gaze drifted to the window. It stood wide open, shutters pushed back. The slight breeze fluttered curtains of deep burgundy. Velvet. Could someone have entered or escaped that way? "No, mon ami," Poirot replied. "This window looks out on a terrace few would traverse in daylight, and the dew undisturbed. No footprints, no displaced gravel. Moreover, the latch is untouched. See how the dust around it remains intact." He flicked a brow. "It is a ruse intended to mislead us." I examined the floor closely. Near the fireplace lay a single lavender, petal tiny, almost imperceptible against the Persian rug's pattern. I pointed to it. Lady Minerva's pouch. Perhaps she crushed a flower in her distress. Poirot stooped, gingerly setting the petal aside on a scrap of white paper. "A good thought, Hastings, yet the petal's colour is too not greyed with age. Someone has intentionally left it here, hoping we connect it to the pouch. Note, too, that this petal is alone. The murderer wished to mimic Lady Minerva's superstition, to frame her or create distraction." I looked about for more such petal crumbs, but found none. Instead, the next anomaly drew my attention: the fireplace itself. The embers lay cold, yet atop the hearth an ashtray held a half-smoked cigarette, its brand unfamiliar. The slender cylinder bore a distinctive gold-band Guinevere, Royals, imported from London. Lord St. Clair never smoked such expensive tobacco. Poirot pocketed the cigarette butt in a small envelope. Another false trail, or a genuine divergence? We shall see. Whoever stood here last desired us to think an outsider passed through. My eyes lingered on the desk lamp, a green-shaded banker's lamp that had been turned to full brightness. Its shade bore fresh smudges of dust around the rim, as though its position had recently shifted. The lamp, too, I observed. Lady Minerva said her husband preferred a softer glow when working. Why this harsh light? Because under bright illumination one discovers discrepancies more readily, Poirot replied. He peered beneath the shade, then raised the lamp. Behind it lay a piece of folded stationery, partly hidden. He retrieved it and unfolded the paper carefully. A telegram addressed to Lady Minerva, dated 2 days prior, from a Mrs. Cornelia Blake. extending condolences for her husband's recent quarrel with a business partner, hinting at uncovered betrayals. I had not known of this, Lady Minerva confessed when we entered the room moments later. My husband never mentioned any dispute with Mrs. Blake. He considered her a friend. Poirot regarded Lady Minerva with mild sympathy. Her handwriting is firm, though the paper has no creases beyond this folds, suggesting deliberate placement. Here, I suspect the letter was brought yesterday by the household maid, and someone tucked it behind the lamp to bring to Lady Minerva's attention. After the deed, she paled. My maid, Imogen, brought me the letter. But after I read it, I returned to my rooms. Ah, Poirot murmured. We shall question Imogen, though it may be that she is but a pawn in a larger game. He rose and motioned for me to accompany him to the corner of the room. There, set against the wall, stood a small side table. Atop it rested a tray with Lord St. Clair's morning cup of tea. Yet the teacup was unusually heavy for porcelain, and the saucer bore a chip that did not match the rest of the fine china service he preferred. At first glance, one might think Lady Minerva's tea service, Poirot said, examining the patina. Delicate spray of lilacs on creamy white. But look at the mark upon the rim. With a jewel-like precision, he touched the chipped edge. This china was acquired by Lady Minerva only last month. Lord St. Clair never drank his tea from these cups. I frowned, but he drank tea here daily. The butler said so. True. Therefore, the murderer set this scene to notice Hastings. That no tea stains marred the lip of the cup. The cup was placed here after the murder, not before. Poirot tapped the saucer. It wobbled slightly, its foot unevenly ground. A disorderly touch. The perpetrator lacked familiarity with the household routines. I stepped back, struck by how each object was contrived. The bottle, the petal, the cigarette, the lamp, the teacupple was staged. Yet beneath each falsity lay a genuine clue. The arsenic powder, the telegram, the single fresh petal. Each piece formed part of a puzzle that only Poirot's little grey cells could assemble. He turned to Lady Minerva. Madame, you spoke of no forced entry, yet a crime of this nature requires planning. Tell me, were any of your guests due to depart last evening? Anyone who would have occasioned Tobe in the house after dinner? She hesitated. My nephew, Victor Hawthorne, had announced a late train, though I urged him to stay. And was he seen here after dinner? I do not know, she admitted. He was in the billiard room for a time, but the servants said he left shortly before midnight. We exchanged glances. Billiard rooms are rarely devoid of dust or stray chalk. We swept the corridor between the billiard room and the study. No chalk marks, no footprints in the faint carpet pile. Victor's departure seemed innocuous, yet Poirot filed the information carefully at the threshold. Poirot paused and inhaled deeply, as if to capture the room's odour. The faintest trace of lavender still lingered, mingled with the metallic tang of disuse. Thus, Hastings, he said quietly, we have two currents at play, the murderer's contrived diversions and the true motive concealed beneath them. Our task now is to sift the false petals from the real evidence and to begin questioning those whose alibis hang by the slenderest thread. I nodded, heart racing with the promise of discovery. As we left the study, I could not help but glance back at the dark window and the silent enigma within. The truth, I sensed, lay just beyond our grasp, but Poirot, I knew, would soon bring it into the light. Chapter 3. The Gathering of Suspects. By mid-morning, Thorngate Hall's drawing room had been transformed into an impromptu council chamber. Rich tapestries in burgundy and gold muffled the hush of whispered conversations, while the late spring light filtered through leaded windows, casting mottled patterns upon the Persian rug. Lady Minerva stood just inside the archway, her lavender gown contrasting with the stern formality of the assembled company. Poirot, ever the picture of calm authority in his grey morning coat, took centre stage as the household and guests filed in one by one. First to enter was Victor Hawthorne, Lady Minerva's only nephew and heir to the estate. He was a tall, lean man with restless blue eyes and a penchant for understated tailoring. His face bore the pallor of recent shock, yet his manner was brisk, even impatient. As he passed Poirot, his gaze flicked nervously toward the study door, as though expecting the spirit of his late uncle to emerge at any moment. "Mr. Hawthorne," Poirot began, voice smooth, "I trust you slept well enough." Victor cleared his throat. "Not particularly, sir." The news was most distressing. He shifted from one foot to the other. "I was in the billiard room until late practicing a shot my uncle encouraged me to attempt. After that, I walked along the terrace. To clear my head, I returned to my rooms around midnight." Poirot inclined his head. "And no one saw you during that time?" "Only the gardener, perhaps. But he would have been at the stables, I imagine." Victor paused, as if uncertain whether to add more. "I left the door unlocked, of course. I had no reason to conceal my movements." Next came Cornelia Blake, whose telegram had hinted at a quarrel. She swept into the room with the poise of a woman accustomed to commanding attention. Her auburn hair was coiffed in severe waves, and her emerald green eyes held an inscrutable gleam. She offered a shallow curtsy to Lady Minerva, then addressed Poirot directly. "Monsieur, I am here at Lady Minerva's request, though I confess surprise at the invitation." She held a leather portfolio. "I understand you wished to see the correspondence between my late husband and Lord St. Clair." Poirot smiled gently. "Madame, there is no suggestion you are anything but a friend. Yet your letter reached Lady Minerva only 2 days ago, suggesting knowledge of private disagreements." Cornelia's lips pressed together. "My late husband and Lord St. Clair had a business arrangement. It soured unexpectedly. I merely wished to offer consolation and, perhaps, mediation." She opened the portfolio to reveal crisp sheets of typed agreements, later amended by hand. "But I had no reason to harm him." Poirot's gaze lingered on the documents. "Your handwriting on the amendment is unmistakable, yet the paper is of a different stock than that used by Lord St. Clair's office, a subtle but telling detail." He closed the portfolio. "Merci, madame." Behind her, Imogen Carter, the maid, hovered hesitantly. She was young and fair, with wide grey eyes rimmed by dark lashes, her posture rigid with anxiety. In gloved hands she clutched a small leather-bound diary. "Madame, requested I bring this forward," she said, voice quivering. "It is Lord St. Clair's private journal. I found it hidden beneath the false bottom of his desk drawer." Poirot took the diary with solemn respect. "Merci, Imogen, you did well." He flipped through the pages, noting dates and brief entries about business matters, social engagements, and curiously references to inner turmoil. One entry, dated a week ago, read, "I fear I am not the man I once was. Shadows in the mind, unsettling whispers." Poirot's eyebrow arched. Lady Minerva gasped softly. "He wrote that." Imogen nodded, eyes downcast. "He asked me to lock it away, but after his death, I felt it should be seen." Poirot gently refolded the diary. Thank you. Your honesty will assist us greatly. Finally, Dr. Felix Penfold, the local physician who had examined the body, entered with professional detachment. He was a stout man with a ruddy complexion and spectacles perched low on his nose. In one hand he carried a leather satchel, in the other a vial of white crystalline powder. Inspector Mallard and I performed the toxicology, Dr. Penfold announced. I have here the remaining trace of arsenic for confirmation. I must caution that such a substance is not easily obtained without drawing attentions. Poirot accepted the vial and peered at it. Indeed, and it is of a purity consistent with pharmaceutical grade. He turned to Lady Minerva. Madame, you said Lord St. Clair took this bottle of eau de cologne each morning. Did anyone else have access to it? She frowned. Only Imogen and I, the butler, sometimes handled it when polishing the bottles. Will you ask Mr. Carter to join us? Poirot requested. The butler, a gaunt man named Alfred Carter, Imogen's father, appeared at the door. He bowed stiffly. Sir. Mr. Carter, Poirot began, did you notice anything unusual about the fragrance bottle yesterday? Alfred's expression was unreadable. Madame complained that the scent smelled sharper, more acrid. I suggested it be replaced, but she insisted it remained Lord St. Clair's preference. He paused, clearing his throat. Later, I found the stopper on the dressing table in usual, as I would have returned it to the chemist's shop for cleaning. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Alfred bowed again and withdrew. With the primary cast assembled, Poirot moved to the centre of the circle. Thus we have 5 individuals whose presence merits closer inspection. Lady Minerva, our grieving host, her nephew, Victor, our hostess's friend, Madame Blake, the maid, Imogen, and Mr. Carter, the butler. Add myself, a humble servant of justice, and Inspector Mallard, who stands ready outside. He indicated the door. We shall proceed with individual interviews, but first let us review the facts known to all. He paced slowly, gloved fingertips, steepled beneath his chin. Lord St. Clair died from arsenic poisoning, delivered in his morning fragrance. The crime scene was staged. The open window, the lavender petal, the borrowed cigarette, the unfamiliar teacouple intended to confuse. The telegram and the journal point to hidden tensions, financial, personal, perhaps psychological. Yet, one detail remains elusive. Why the lavender pouch? Lady Minerva, you believe it significant? Lady Minerva nodded, her voice tremulous. My grandmother's pouch. She said it warded off dark thoughts. I always thought it mere superstition. Superstition can mask reality, Poirot mused. This pouch vanished 2 nights ago, only to perhaps reappear there physically or in spirit through staged clues. Whoever removed it understood its symbolism. Cornelia Blake crossed her arms. Surely you do not suspect superstition led to murder? Not superstition, Madame Poirot replied, but what superstition conceals. Emotional scars, old grievances, fears unspoken. He raised a finger. Now, each of you will recount your actions from 10 o'clock until midnight on the night in question. Speak truthfully, for the smallest hesitation or contradiction may light our way. He turned first to Victor, then to Cornelia, Imogen, and finally Mr. Carter. One by one they took seats in the high-backed chairs arranged around the room, ready to unburden their timelines. The afternoon sun warmed the tapestries, but a chill of suspense descended upon them all. Outside, the ancient walls of Thorngate held their breath, as if awaiting the revelation that would soon rend the circle of trust and lay bare the darkest heart among them. Chapter 4. Initial interviews begin. Poirot motioned for us to settle in. The gallery adjoining the drawing room, where a semicircle of her-backed chairs faced him like silent witnesses. The portraits of Thorngate ancestors loomed overhead, their eyes seemingly fixed upon the proceedings. I took my accustomed seat beside Lady Minerva, notebook open but hand poised in respectful restraint. Poirot rose and surveyed the group with that calm, unblinking intensity which always set my heart racing, for I knew that behind those tranquil eyes his mind raced at full speed. "Madame," he began, turning first to Lady Minerva, "you have graciously shared your grief with us. Now I ask you to recount your movements between 10 o'clock and midnight on the night of your husband's death. Be as precise as possible, and do not omit any detail, no matter how trivial it may seem." Lady Minerva inhaled deeply, smoothing the folds of her lavender gown. After supper, I retired to my sitting room, where I attempted to distract myself by practicing the harp for Lord St. Clair's planned recital this Sunday. I played until about 10:40, when Imogen brought me a cup of tea in those new lilac-patterned cups. She paused, eyes downcast. I was disturbed by the telegram I had received the day before, so I read the letter again, perhaps more sharply than I should have. Then I laid it behind the lamp on Lord St. Clair's desk, partly to show it to him in the morning. Poirot's moustaches quivered, and after you left the sitting room, I wandered the corridors, she continued, calling softly for Imogen, for I wished to send her to bed. I paused outside the study door when I heard nothing but quiet. I pressed my ear to the panel. No sound. I knocked lightly, but there was no answer. Fearing something amiss, I sent Imogen to fetch Alfred. That is all I recall until the butler's urgent summons a short while later. Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, madame. Your recollection is clear. Now, Monsieur Hawthorne." Victor hesitated as he rose. He ran a hand through his hair, betraying nerves that his composed manner tried to conceal. "I left the billiard room at 10:30, he began, voice tight. "I played until the gaslight dimmed, then decided to stretch my legs. I strolled along the terrace, and while the dew made the stones slick, I thought the cool air would clear my mind. I passed by the study window, was shut tight, shutters closed. I heard no voices. Did you see anyone en route, Poirot?" asked. Victor frowned. "No one. I have no idea when Lord St. Clair last saw me. I did not expect any further attentions." He glanced at the window that led to the terrace, as though seeing in his mind's eye the route he had taken. I returned to my rooms around 11:15 and spent the next hour reading a letter from my bank concerning my inheritance. Rather dull, I admit. I only learned of my uncle's death when the butler knocked at my door. Poirot stroked his moustaches contemplatively. "You mention the window shutters, yet in the study they stand open. Do you know who might have opened them after 10:30? Victor's jaw tightened. "You know, I do not." He shifted uncomfortably. "I did pass Lord St. Clair's window again on my return, and I thought I saw the curtains stir as though someone inside moved. But at that hour, shadows play tricks." "Indeed," Poirot murmured. "Thank you, Monsieur Hawthorne. Madame Blake, you may speak next." Cornelia Blake rose with deliberate elegance, her emerald eyes fixed upon Poirot as she cradled her portfolio. After dinner, I retired to my bedroom to work on correspondence. "I received your telegram, Lady Minerva, and felt compelled to respond immediately. I finished drafting my reply just before 10, then went to Lady Minerva's sitting room to deliver it. She was absorbed in her music, so I left the telegram on the small table beside her harp. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And did you notice anything unusual about that room?" Cornelia's lips curved into a faint smile. "Only that Lady Minerva's mood was more sombre than usual. I observed her glance occasionally toward the study door, but the room itself was as she left it, music sheets scattered, a cup of cold tea on the piano, and, yes, a solitary lavender petal on the floor. I thought she had dropped it from her pouch." A ripple ran through the group. Lady Minerva's cheeks flushed. Poirot raised a hand. "Madame Blake, that petal you saw, was it greyed with age, or fresh and vivid?" Cornelia hesitated. "Now that you mention it, I believe it was fresh bright purple against the rug. I assumed she had carried fresh lavender in her pouch." She pressed her lips. "I did not think much of it at the time." "Thank you," Poirot said. He returned the portfolio to Cornelia. "Proceed." Cornelia resumed. "At 10:30, I went downstairs to the library to fetch tea leaves I had forgotten. The corridor was empty, and upon entering the library I found the butler, Mr. Carter, already there, polishing the silver teapot." She paused, gaze flickering. "He hurried to tell me the master had summoned him. I left immediately, returning to my rooms by 11. Poirot nodded and motioned her to sit. He turned then to Imogen, the maid, her youthful face drawn in apprehension. Imogen rose unsteadily, clutching the diary. "I was tidying Lady Minerva's sitting room after delivering her telegram," she began. "I noticed the harp stool moved, but thought nothing until I saw the lavender petal on the rug. I assumed, as did Madame Blake, that Lady Minerva dropped it. I set it aside in the dictionary on the desk." Her voice faltered. Then she swallowed. "I went to fetch fresh linens from the linen closet across the corridor. As I passed the study, I heard a thud, like a heavy object dropped. I called out, but no answer. I knocked, but again silence. I ran to the butler for help. That is all I did until they sent me away." Poirot's eyes softened. "Thank you, Imogen. You were brave to speak so openly." He pocketed the diary for safekeeping and turned to Alfred Carter, who stood with a steward's restraint. Alfred glanced at his daughter before speaking. "I was polishing the eau de cologne bottle in the master's dressing room. I noticed its stopper was missing and asked Imogen if she had misplaced it. She said she had not seen it. I put the bottle aside and went to inspect the study door, which I found ajar. I entered to call for my master, but he did not answer. I thought him indisposed, so I retrieved my master's favourite scented handkerchief and approached. That was when I saw the body." Poirot nodded, noting each detail. "You then summoned Dr. Penfold and Inspector Mallard." "Indeed," Alfred replied. "I thought it a feint from which he might recover." A hush fell. Poirot surveyed them once more. "You have all described movements that intersect at the study door between 10:40 and 11. Yet no two accounts share the same exact moment or detail. These discrepancies are our lodestars, Mies, Amos. We shall examine each more closely. For now, I have what I need to begin my deeper inquiries. I thank you all for your candour." He bowed slightly, invitation to depart. As they filed out, tension remained taut in the air, like a drawn bowstring. I caught Poirot's eye and saw the spark of relentless curiosity. Outside, the gallery's silence seemed charged with potential. Secrets had been laid bare, if only in fragments, Poirot's little grey cells would piece them together. We, too, must prepare, for the true heart of this mystery still lay hidden, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. Chapter 5. The first false lead. The late afternoon sun slanted through the mullioned windows of Thorngate. Halls open. Library, as Poirot and I returned to the scene of yesterday's tragedy. The room, once the master's sanctuary, now felt hollow, its leather-bound tomes and silver-bound decanters reduced to silent witnesses. Lady Minerva had excused herself, insisting on the morning's grief, and the household was hushed under Inspector Mallard's authoritative watch. Yet within these walls a new drama was unfolding, one that would, for a brief moment, ensnare all attention and direct suspicion away from the true culprit. Inspector Mallard stood by the writing desk, poring over a sheaf of statements and sketches. His burly frame cast a long shadow across the carpet, and he looked up as Poirot approached, smoothing the brim of his bowler hat. "Monsieur Poirot," he greeted, "we've uncovered what appears to be a fairly solid case, though I'd welcome your insight before I proceed." Poirot's moustaches twitched. "Please, Inspector, share your discovery." He motioned for me to stand by the fireplace, and we both listened intently. Mallard cleared his throat. "We've retraced Victor Hawthorne's path, his walk on the terrace, his return to his rooms, and then his re-emergence to summon help. But we've also recovered this." He produced a worn leather glove, its fingertips frayed and the wrist torn, "found in the garden near the eastern terrace steps exacti, where the gravel meets the flower bed. It's covered in what appears to be clay and a faint trace of lavender pollen." I exchanged a glance with Poirot. The glove looked common enough, brown leather, unlined, and though the discovery seemed promising, its provenance was uncertain. Poirot, however, remained inscrutable. Mallard continued, his voice growing more confident. "We think Victor may have returned to the terrace after midnight, perhaps to escape guilt or to dispose of evidence. The lavender pollen suggests a link to the missing pouch. The murderer wore Lady Minerva's lavender as a signature, perhaps, and the glove belonged to him." Poirot nodded courteously. "An astute observation, Inspector. And the glove? It matches Mr. Hawthorne's own gloves," Mallard declared, producing a second glove, nearly identical. "Victor's valet identified it by the stitching pattern. He lost one last night during his stroll. He confesses to kicking at a stone in frustration. We believe he discarded the glove here, returning to his rooms afterward." A murmur ran through the assembled officers. Mallard looked to Poirot. "Given these facts, we intend to charge Mr. Hawthorne with the murder of his uncle." I felt a jolt of disbelief. Victor had seemed earnest, even guileless, but the glove was convincing. Yet as I looked at Poirot, I saw in his eyes the beginnings of a challenge, the spark of doubt awaiting resolution. Poirot raised a slender finger. "Inspector, let us consider the evidence carefully. The glove bears clay and pollen, yes, but the glove's presence in the garden does not conclusively prove its owner walked there after the crime. It could have been placed there by another to mislead. Furthermore, you say the lavender pollen is fresh." Mallard nodded. "We analyzed the particles under magnification. Fresh lavender, not the dried grey of Lady Minerva's heirloom pouch." "Precisely my point," Poirot said softly. "If the murderer sought to mimic her superstition, would he not use dried lavender to match the pouch? Fresh lavender suggests someone wished to imply a connection without regard to such detail. And clay, this garden's soil is light chalky loam, yet the glove's deposit is dense, almost like a potter's clay, found only in the greenhouse. Inspector Mallard frowned. The greenhouse. But that lies beyond the locked north wing, and none of the household staff reported any intrusion there. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, but yesterday we heard of a missing trowel from the gardener's. Shedan implement used only in the greenhouse for repotting delicate orchids. If that tool were used, one might leave traces of that richer clay on a leather glove. He looked at me. Hastings, did you notice the greenhouse door? I recalled crossing its threshold earlier in the day and finding the door unlatched. It stood slightly ajar, monsieur, but I attributed it to the gardener's routine. An understandable assumption, Poirot said. Yet if the murderer entered the greenhouse to obtain clay, he would have left it open to avoid detection by those expecting it locked. This scene would thus implicate Victor. He wore a glove, left it in the garden, and appeared bound to the pouch's symbolism. But a discerning mind sees the perfect frame. Mallard's brow furrowed. You suggest Victor is innocent. Not innocence assured, Poirot replied, but that we must question the narrative woven by this so-called evidence. We must inspect the greenhouse for other clues, examine the trowel's location, and verify who had access. Turned to the constables. Bring the glove, the trowel, if found, and any fingerprints from the greenhouse door and soil samples. As the officers dispersed, Poirot turned to me quietly. Mon ami, this is our first false lighter masterpiece of misdirection. The murderer wishes us to pursue Victor, to close the case swiftly and divert suspicion from the true architect. He tapped the glove's cuff. Notice the gloves wear patterns. The left-hand thumb is more frayed than the right, suggesting greater use. Yet the copy we saw in Victor's rooms showed the opposite. His right glove is more worn. Someone took Victor's left-hand glove, planted it here, and accused him. I whistled softly, ingenious and cruel. Poirot smiled thinly. Cruelty is the murderer's companion. Now, Hastings, we must confirm our hypothesis. We shall visit the greenhouse ourselves, inspect the trowel, and question the gardener. He paused, but before we depart, I wish to speak privately with Madame Blake in Lady Minerva's drawing room. I watched as Poirot moved gracefully out of the library, leaving Mallard to regroup with his officers. The inspector glanced back, uncertain, as though suddenly aware that the case had become more complex than he first imagined. Moments later, Poirot re-emerged with Cornelia Blake at his side. They exchanged hushed words near the fireplace. Her expression was guarded, her green eyes glinting with curiosity and a trace of apprehension. Poirot closed the distance between them, lowering his voice still further. I trust, madame, that you understand the delicate nature of this investigation. The glove was a misdirection. I would ask you again, where were you between 11 and midnight? Cornelia lifted her chin. I have already told you, Inspector Mallard, that I was in my rooms drafting my letter. After I delivered it, I went straight back, and remained until 11:20, when I retired for the night. Poirot's gaze remained fixed on her, and yet no servant saw you, no footman crossed your path. She met his eyes unwaveringly. None, monsieur. The household corridors are seldom used after 10. Why do you question me again? Merely to ensure the timeline is airtight, Poirot said softly. For, unless every alibi is confirmed, the true path remains obscured. He inclined his head politely and moved away. I approached him as Mallard beckoned us toward the library. Door, come, Hastings, Poirot murmured. The greenhouse awaits. Let us see if the trowel yields the next clue or, perhaps, a fresh petal. He offered me a knowing smile, and together we followed the inspector's men, leaving behind the arrested glove and the illusion of a solved crime. The real mystery, Poirot knew, had only just begun. Chapter 6. The psychological game late that afternoon. As golden light slanted across the greenhouse's vaulted glass, Poirot stood surveying the orchids and palms with an intensity that belied his serene demeanor. Inspector Mallard examined the trowel and the glove's fingerprint samples nearby, while I watched the gardener, Mr. Brightwell, nervously dust soil from his cap. The air smelled faintly of potting earth and citrus from the adjacent conservatory. Poirot's little grey cells were at work, but he allowed the others to busy themselves as he prepared the first of his subtle entrapments. Mon ami Hastings, Poirot murmured, beckoning me to a secluded corner. Observe the expressions of our suspects when I release my carefully chosen words. He smiled, tapping a delicate finger against his chin. Psychology, not force, will break this case. We shall employ a strategy of suggestion and watch their reactions. He approached Inspector Mallard and the gardener, raising his voice just enough for Imogen Carter, the maid, and Victor Hawthorne, who lingered at the greenhouse threshold. To hear Poirot, said Monsieur Brightwell, your trowel and Mr. Hawthorne's glove show identical clay traces, yet you insisted the soil here is chalky loam, not potter's clay. How do you explain this discrepancy? The gardener's face went pale. He swallowed hard, lips trembling. Beg your pardon, sir. I must have grabbed a spare trowel when tending the orchids. There was a broken handle on the usual one, and I borrowed the potter's trowel stored next door. Poirot inclined his head. Understandable, if true. But why did you not mention this when first questioned? It could have spared Mr. Hawthorne much distress. Brightwell's voice wavered. I was ashamed, sir. I knew the proper tool was missing, but I thought it inconsequential. So, you misled Inspector Mallard, Poirot observed calmly, not to protect anyone, merely to hide your own mistake. The gardener's shoulders sagged. Yes, sir. Poirot nodded and moved on, leaving behind the gardener's shame. Hastings, you see how a small, personal embarrassment can cloud the mind. Our murderer must feel similar fear, and will reveal it if properly nudged. He next called Imogen Carter forward. In the greenhouse's dappled light, she appeared hesitant. Poirot addressed her with gentle firmness. Imogen, you told me you heard a thud behind the study door late that night. Yet you also said you saw the lavender petal, bright and fresh, on the sitting room floor. Tell me, did you pick it up and set it aside, or did someone else move it? Imogen bit her lip. I thought it was Lady Minerva's, so I placed it on the dictionary in her sitting room, not thinking it important. She glanced sideways at Lady Minerva's empty drawing room beyond the glass. Then I went to the linen closet. Poirot's eyes narrowed subtly, but the petal we found in the study was in the center of the rug, not on the desk. How many petals were there originally? Imogen, her face blanched. Only the one I saw. Poirot inclined his head curtly. Very well. He let the tension linger. Imogen's discomfort was palpable. She clasped her hands, uncertain where to look. Thank you. You may go. As she hurried away, Poirot turned to Victor Hawthorne, who had crossed his arms. Monsieur, I understand you saw the curtains stir as if someone moved inside the study when you passed. Yet you also claimed the shutters were closed. Which is it? Victor swallowed nervously. I thought I saw movement, but perhaps I only imagined it in the moonlight. He ran a hand through his hair, gaze darting to the greenhouse's exit. Poirot smiled faintly. A natural uncertainty. Yet Those who lie seldom admit uncertainty. Your hesitation suggests you wish to conceal something. Think deeply, monsieur. Did you indeed pause at that window, or did you purposefully avoid looking closely? Victor's jaw tightened, and he looked away. I did pause. I saw a shadow flit across the curtains. Poirot nodded. Thank you. Your recollection has clarified itself. He allowed no further comment, leaving Victor to stew in silence. Next, Poirot invited Cornelia Blake into the greenhouse's warmer core, where palms arched overhead. He produced the telegram she had sent and reheld the folded note near her. Madame Blake, your letter hinted at uncovered betrayals. Yet Lady Minerva's own records show no suggestion of foul play until yesterday. Whom did you believe? You were consoling. Cornelia's elegant composure wavered. She touched the telegram's edge, her knuckles whitening. My husband believed their business venture was betrayed by Lord St. Clair. I wrote to console Lady Minerva, thinking she grieved that loss. Poirot inclined his moustaches. A reasonable motive to mend old wounds. Yet why, madame, did you amend the contract in your own hand on different paper? Why not request Lord St. Clair's original documents? Cornelia's lips pressed together. I wished to expedite matters. It was more convenient. Poirot fixed her with a steady gaze. Convenience can be a cloak for ambition. Is it not true that you stood to gain significantly should the venture fail? Her eyes flickered with anger. I stand to gain nothing from his death. Perhaps, Poirot replied softly. Or perhaps that remains to be seen. By now, Inspector Mallard had halted his examination of the trowel and approached, visibly irritated. Monsieur Poirot, we must conclude here. I have grounds to hold Victor Hawthorne. Poirot turned to Mallard, palms open in mock surrender. By all means, proceed, if you will. But recall this, the wheel of justice must turn smoothly, not on a faulty axle. I beseech you, inspect each crack before driving home the hammer. He bowed, then led the inspector away, pausing only to mark the subtle twitch of Cornelia's lips and the tremor in Victor's shoulders. As Mallard and Poirot departed the greenhouse together, I lingered, studying the glove lying abandoned on the workbench and the broken flower-pot shards by the orchid's roots. Neither spoke as they left, but their silence thrummed with unspoken purpose. Outside, the fading light cast long shadows across the lawn. Poirot walked briskly toward the house, hat tilted at a rakish angle. The game, Hastings, has truly begun, he said, glancing at me with keen satisfaction. We have prompted fear, guilt, confusion in each suspect. Now we wait for the reactions to bubble forth. I fell into step beside him, heart racing. The psychological stage was set, and the players restless. Deep within Thorngate Hall, unseen forces, stirred, and Poirot's little grey cells raced ahead, seeking the trembling thread that would unravel the murderer's web. Chapter 7. A secondary mystery. Late that evening, the household was gathered. Once more in Lady Minerva's drawing-room, the fire crackling softly in the hearth and casting flickering shadows against the damask walls. The tension that had gripped Thorngate Hall since Lord St. Clair's death had not abated. Indeed, it seemed to deepen with each passing hour. Poirot sat in a fauteuil beside Lady Minerva, taking tea from a delicate cup, while Inspector Mallard conferred in low tones with Dr. Penfold near the mantel. I stood by the window, listening to the hush broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock. It was then that Imogen Carter stumbled into the room, her face drained of colour. She clutched her throat with one hand, the other holding a trembling Teacup, mademoiselle, she gasped, voice strangled. Something is wrong with the tea. In an instant, Poirot set down his cup and rose. Mon Dieu, he exclaimed. Quick, bring water, Inspector. Mallard dashed to the sideboard, where a decanter of cold spring water waited, and returned moments later, placing a glass at Imogen's lips. She drank it greedily, eyes unfocused. Dr. Penfold bent to examine her. Poison, he declared, voice grave. Whatever she drank was laced with a powerful toxin, likely the same arsenic used against Lord St. Clair. He knelt to feel her pulse. She must be taken to her room immediately. I shall administer an antidote at once. Lady Minerva sprang to her feet. No, let me help. Imogen is my maid. She seized a small silver salver and escorted Imogen to a settee, where Poirot and I assisted her as Dr. Penfold prepared an injection. The doctor carefully drew a vial from his satchel, then administered it in the maid's arm. Imogen's lips quivered, but her breathing steadied, and colour crept back into her cheeks as the doctor worked. Poirot's eyes bored into Lady Minerva. Madame, he said quietly, did you serve the tea yourself? Lady Minerva glanced at the cup on the salver. I did. I asked Imogen to bring fresh hot tea from the kitchen. It was my own command. I offered her mine when she returned. Her voice trembled. She refused, saying she preferred my cup because it was cooler. I did not think. Mallard, having regained some composure, approached Poirot. This changes everything, he muttered. Whoever tried to poison Imogen must be here in this very room. Poirot's moustaches twitched. Yes, and they intended us to discover the attempt, so as to distract from the true murderer. A classic tactic. Commit a secondary crime to fracture our focus. Dr. Penfold straightened and pocketed his syringe. Imogen will live if she rests. But the poison was quick-acting, suggesting the same method as Lord St. Clair's death and in tea, potent enough in a single cup. Poirot picked up the abandoned teacup and saucer with gloved hands. He examined the cup's interior, then touched the rim. Note this, he said, indicating a faint smear where the lip met the glaze. A slender line of residue shimmering in the firelight. Whoever introduced the poison did so carefully, perhaps using a small spoon or a vial applicator. He turned the cup over, inspecting the saucer beneath, and here a single speck of golden lacquer from Imogen's own locket, which she dropped when she gasped. He unfolded a scrap of white paper and collected the flake with tweezers. This, regrettably, will dissolve our hopes of a simple culprit. I frowned. Then who did this? Was it Cornelia, driven by resentment? Or Victor, in a final bid to misdirect? Or perhaps Mr. Carter, loyal to his master's memory? My voice was tentative. Poirot closed his eyes momentarily, as though summoning invisible threads. Let us not guess, Hastings. Let us observe. He placed the teacup on a side table and surveyed the assembled suspects. Lady Minerva, drawn, pale and anxious. Victor, eyes wide. Cornelia, shoulders squared. Alfred Carter, grim-faced. And the inspector, arms folded. Whoever amongst you wore the guise of helper must be suspected, Poirot said aloud. For who but the guilty would feign concern while fanning new suspicion? He paused, letting the silence grow oppressive. Madame Blake, you observed Imogen's collapse, yet you remained seated, offering no aid. Why? Cornelia Blake bristled. Of course, I was shocked. I merely stood to see if she would recover. I did not wish to alarm the household further. Perhaps. Poirot acknowledged. Then he turned to Victor. Monsieur Hawthorne, you were at the mantel speaking with Inspector Mallard. Did you not notice Imogen's distress immediately? Victor's cheeks reddened. I thought her words addressed to me. I turned, but by then Dr. Penfold was already attending her. Poirot nodded again. Very well, Mr. Carter. You were polishing the silver beside the hearth. Did you leave the trowel in the study when you went for Mallard? Alfred Carter stiffened. I had occasion to fetch the butler's key from the study, yes, but I left the trowel where it lay. Why? Because the trowel bears traces of arsenic, Poirot said quietly. We tested the soil samples from its blade. The toxin adhered to the metal, indicating the gardener, or someone using his tool, applied it to another's cup. He looked at the butler's gaunt face. You had access to the key, Mr. Carter. You handled the fragrance bottle earlier, and you could easily slip poison into a teacup unnoticed. Carter's jaw clenched. You insinuate I am the murderer. His voice was low but steady. I served the master faithfully, and I would never harm a child, much less my own daughter. Poirot's eyes softened. A murder is not the work of an enlightened conscience. It requires resolve, unburdened by remorse. He held Carter's gaze, calm yet unyielding. Then he turned to Lady Minerva. Madame, you were the first to drink from your cup, yet you claim to have offered Imogen the same. Why choose your own vessel rather than a freshly prepared one for yourself? Lady Minerva shook her head. I did not think. My hand trembled. I did not consider. A low rumble of thunder sounded, as though the house itself protested the revelations. Poirot stepped back, closing his hand over his heart. Mies Amos, we have been presented with a secondary mystery, an attempted murder to obscure the original crime. This act was intended to scatter our suspicion in multiple directions, but note only one individual benefits from this chaos. He surveyed the group one last time. Tonight we rest each soul uneasy, each conscience tinged with fear. Tomorrow we shall gather again at dawn. Each of you will present an item from last night's events, a glove, a petal, a key, a note, whatever you deem most significant. We will examine them together, and the truth will emerge, like a flower at first. Light. With that, Poirot bowed and retreated to a neighboring gallery, leaving the household in stunned silence. I followed him out, offering my arm in silent solidarity. Outside, the corridors were empty, the hush profound. Noose, Avunkins, Hastings. Poirot murmured as we walked. The murderer grows restless. He or she will reveal more in their haste to conceal. Tomorrow, at dawn, we shall see the next move. I nodded, watching the flicker of the lantern in Poirot's hand. The secondary mystery had deepened the web of intrigue, yet I felt certain that each thread now led closer to the killer's identity. And I, like Poirot, would be ready to follow every one. Chapter 8. Hidden Connections. The dawn mist curled around the turrets of Thorngate Hall as Poirot and I reassembled in the oak-panelled morning room. The air smelled of damp earth and blooming lilac, yet beneath it lingered the scent of yesterday's unease. Morning light filtered through the leaded windows, illuminating the assembled suspects. Lady Minerva, pale yet resolute. Victor Hawthorne, restless. Cornelia Blake, poised. Alfred Carter, austere. And even Imogen Carter, newly recovered, her eyes wide with trepidation. Inspector Mallard and Dr. Penfold stood to one side, ready for whatever revelations the day would bring. Poirot, seated at a small writing desk, placed before each person an item they had been instructed to choose the previous evening. The objects lay upon the desk in deliberate order: the torn leather glove, the dried lavender petal, the chipped teacup, the telegram, the broken trowel, Imogen's locket fragment, and most significant Lord St. Clair's private diary, Mies. Amos, Poirot began, his voice calm yet charged with purpose. We meet again to delve beneath the surface of yesterday's events. Each of you has brought forth a token, evidence, morsel, or memory. Today we shall discover the hidden threads that bind you all. He lifted the diary. First, let us examine this journal. It contains more than mere notes on business. It reveals personal entanglements. He opened it to an entry dated 3 weeks prior and read aloud. I fear I have wronged her. My dealings with Cornelia have grown too intimate, yet I cannot sever our partnership without consequence. He looked up at Cornelia. Monsieur St. Clair wrote this of you, madame. How do you respond? Cornelia's composure wavered for the first time. She pressed her gloved hand to her heart. Our partnership was strictly business until the venture turned sour. I admitted my disappointment in his judgment, nothing more. Poirot raised a brow. Yet he chose to use initials rather than a full name, suggesting shame or secrecy. He flipped to the next entry. VH, my nephew's debts spiral. I must protect the estate from disgrace. Perhaps a loan or other solution. He looked to Victor. This indicates Lord St. Clair knew of your financial difficulties. Victor's face flushed. I asked for assistance. Yes, but he refused unless I reconciled with Cornelia's late husband's heirs. The matter was delicate. Poirot nodded. Delicate indeed. Now, note this entry from 2 nights ago. My heart trembles at what I have discovered. Minerva's secret past. Her liaison at Cambridge. Should this emerge, the family's honour will crumble. He closed the diary. My lady, you have long hidden a youthful romance that threatened Lord St. Clair's claim to the title. Lady Minerva's eyes brimmed. He discovered a letter from my youth, proof of a clandestine affair that would have spilled into scandal. I confronted him in tears, begging mercy upon my reputation. He agreed, but warned me that any further indiscretion would end in disaster. Poirot steepled. His fingers. Thus, 3 of you bear personal histories entwined with Lord St. Clair. Cornelia's business entanglement, Victor's financial straits, and Lady Minerva's past indiscretion. Yet these connections alone do not constitute motive for murder. We must seek deeper links. He gestured to the torn glove. This left-hand glove, borrowed from Victor's collection, bore a match in stitch and wear. Yet the pattern of holes suggests the glove was cut deliberately to create a tear. Who among you could fashion such a deception? Imogen shuddered. I know nothing of cutting gloves, monsieur. Indeed, Poirot acknowledged. But someone wished Victor framed, exploiting his proximity to the terrace. Now, consider the chipped teacup. He lifted the saucer. This lilac-patterned china belonged to Lady Minerva, yet the chip's location corresponds exactly to the impact inflicted by Lord St. Clair's walking cane upon his. Study Mantola. Cane you, madame, once used in anger. Lady Minerva's hand flew to her throat. Yes, I lost control once, when he threatened to reveal my secret. I struck the mantle in frustration, chipping that cup, but I did not harm him. Poirot nodded, gravely. Still, this ties you physically to the scene of conflict. Next, the dried lavender petal. He placed a small bloom on a scrap of white paper. This is from Lady Minerva's heirloom pouch. Yet the one discovered in the sitting room was fresh, bright purple, likely from the garden, not her dried stash. Victor leaned forward. The greenhouse orchid beds have fresh lavender, do they not? Precisely, Poirot confirmed. Someone plucked fresh lavender to mimic the heirloom's symbolism, sowing confusion. He tapped the broken trowel. That tool was used to dig in the greenhouse, potting bench perhaps, to obtain fresh clay. But what else was buried there? He turned to Dr. Penfold. Doctor, you found traces of arsenic on the trowel, yet you insisted that poisoning required a vial of pharmaceutical grade, obtainable only through a doctor or chemist. Dr. Penfold frowned. I maintain that only those with medical connections could procure such pure arsenic. Poirot's gaze settled on Imogen. And you, Imogen, have recently visited London to stay with your cousin, a junior nurse at St. Bartholomew's Hospital. Would you not have knowledge of medical substances? The maid's face blanched. She swallowed. I studied with her. Yes, but I never handled arsenic. Poirot's eyes remained unblinking. Perhaps not. But you could easily observe how it is stored and administered. Imogen's lip trembled. Monsieur, it was all so frightening. I only sought to protect Lady Minerva. An admirable sentiment, Poirot said, but misplaced, if guided by fear rather than reason. He rose and moved to the telegram. Finally, this message from Cornelia. The paper stock differs from Lord St. Clair's office, indicating you prepared it separately. Yet the amendments bear his handwriting. You inserted those clauses, your self-admissions of betrayal, then forwarded it to Lady Minerva. Cornelia's veneer cracked. I wrote that to provoke him into resolving our dispute. I never intended harm. Poirot folded his hands. We now see a web of secret alliances and resentments, each suspect intimately connected to the deceased. Yet, the murder lies not in emotion alone, but in the precise act of staging evidence. The murderer understood the family secrets, the heirlooms, the relationship sound manipulated them. He paused, letting his words sink in. Mies, Amos, these hidden connections reveal potential motives, but we have not yet revealed the direct culprit. That shall come in time. For now, remember this. The killer is not the one most wronged, but the one most cunning who could weave these threads into a coherent tapestry of deceit. He closed the diary and bowed. We reconvene at midday in the library. Bring yourselves, and no more. The final stages of our inquiry await. As the suspects dispersed, I caught Victor's anguished glance, Lady Minerva's tremulous composure, Cornelia's restrained panic, Imogen's guilt-laden shame, and Carter's steely reserve. Each bore the weight of secrets laid bare. Tomorrow, Poirot promised, the tapestry would unravel and every knot would be exposed. Chapter 9. Poirot's secret clue by midday. The grand library's heavy drapes had been drawn aside, and the sun flooded the tall windows, illuminating rows of leather-bound volumes. The musty scent of aged paper mingled with the faint tang of disinfectant. From Dr. Penfold's earlier ministrations to Imogen and created an atmosphere both scholarly and clinical. Poirot, seated at the librarian's desk, motioned for us all to take our places. He rested his gloved hands upon an open leather folio that contained sketches and notes he had compiled throughout the Pin investigation. The suspects, Lady Minerva, Victor Hawthorne, Cornelia Blake, Imogen Carter, and Alfred Carter arrived one by one, their expressions masks of polite curiosity concealing unease. Inspector Mallard and Dr. Penfold stood at the periphery, ready to observe Poirot's next manoeuvres. I joined my customary place beside Poirot, heart beating with anticipation. Mies, Amos. Poirot began, in lilting French-accented English. We have laid bare the outward connections, petals, gloves, teacups, trowels, and diaries. Now I present to you the secret clue that illuminates the path forward. He tapped the folio, and at his gesture, Imogen produced a worn envelope bearing no name. I asked each of you to retrieve an item of significance. Most complied willingly. Yet this envelope remained in my possession until now. He peeled back the flap and withdrew a single sheet of paper, its edges curled with age. He held it gingerly between thumb and forefinger. This, Mies Amos, is the receipt for Lord St. Clair's personal gas lamp. Oil dated the very morning of his death. He placed it under the lamp's light. Nothing remarkable, you say. But note the embossed watermark. Fosmos and Vale, chemists to the crown. A rather exclusive provider, would you not agree? Lady Minerva leaned forward. He ordered lamp oil. She whispered, I knew of no need. Poirot nodded. He used this oil for a private ritual, reading in near-complete darkness, relying on the lamp's light to focus solely on the text. But the critical detail is the time. He pointed to the scrawled notation at the paper's foot. Delivery received. 2:17 a.m. I saw Victor start visibly, and Cornelia's breath caught. Poirot allowed the moment to simmer before continuing. We established that this oil arrived long after every suspect claimed to be asleep or away from the house. It could not have been delivered without someone inside facilitating the transaction. He turned to the butler. Mr. Carter, you hold the keys to the household. Surely you authorized the lamp oil's delivery. Alfred Carter cleared his throat. I signed for it, yes. But the order was placed by Lord St. Clair's own hand. I found the request scribbled in his journal, attached to the entry you read yesterday. He glanced at the diary on the side table as though suddenly suspect. Poirot's moustaches quivered. Indeed, the order was in his handwriting, which suggests his involvement. Yet the delivery slip bears the signature of the courier alone. No record of Lord St. Clair's signature appears on the merchant's copy. Observe the flourish at the end. It matches the scrawl on Lady Minerva's own order for new lavender sachets 3 weeks prior. Gasps rippled around the room. Lady Minerva's lips parted. My sachets? But that was weeks ago. Poirot smiled thinly. Yes, the distinctive loop in the final letter is identical. It seems someone forged Lord St. Clair's request using your pattern, madame, and someone had access to your stationery and to the chemist's invoices for that. Who among us had both? His gaze swept the group, pausing on Cornelia, then on Victor, then on Imogen. I felt the tension coalesce into a stark shape. The killer forged a document using Lady Minerva's stationery, arranged for the lamp oil to be delivered at an ungodly hour, and thus guaranteed a private moment in the study under low lighting. In that half-light, they could lace the eau de cologne with arsenic without detection. Poirot continued, voice soft but firm. This delivery was the key to the crime. Only under that dim glow could one administer poison so precisely. It also provided the perfect cover. The lamp oil's arrival served as a pretext for someone to slip into the study unnoticed. He looked at Imogen. You deliver messages and items to Lady Minerva and to the study at all hours. You know the schedules. Imogen's eyes filled with tears. Monsieur Poirot, I did fetch letters and parcels for Lady Minerva when she requested, but I would never harm her family. Perhaps not, Poirot conceded. But you did deliver this forged request. He held up the delivery slip again. You had motive, fear for Lady Minerva's reputation. You believed Lord St. Clair would destroy her over the old scandal. By forging his signature, you arranged the lamp oil, created the dark moment, and ensured he would receive his fatal. Dozy Imogen's shoulders sagged, and she covered her face with trembling hands. I only wanted to protect her. I tried to delay him just a small dose to render him unconscious before I could reveal his plan. But he drank more. Her voice cracked. I never meant to kill him. A hush fell. Lady Minerva rushed forward, embracing Imogen in desperation. Victor and Cornelia exchanged stunned looks, and Alfred Carter stiffened, as though frozen by betrayal. Inspector Mallard stepped forward, solemn. Imogen Carter, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Lady Minerva through the death of Lord St. Clair. Poirot rose and placed his hand gently on the maid's shoulder. Mon enfant, your devotion was admirable, but the method was grievously flawed. Justice must follow the law. He turned to the others. Now you understand the importance of the secret clue. With this revelation, the path to complete resolution shall become clear. He paused, letting the weight of the moments settle. Tomorrow, at the final gathering, each thread will unite into one tapestry. Until then, I bid you reflect on how fear and loyalty can lead to tragic error. He bowed and signaled Mallard to lead Imogen away, that as the maid was escorted from the room, Poirot looked at me and whispered, Hastings, our secret clue has broken the stalemate. The final steps draw near. I nodded, heart pounding. The stage was set for the grand reveal, and Poirot's little grey cells were already dancing with the solution. Chapter 10. Tensions. Rise the hush of the late morning within Thorngate halls. Drawing room belied the storm brewing beneath polite appearances. Lady Minerva sat stiffly on a settee beside a low marble table, her hands folded so tightly that her knuckles shone white. Opposite her, Victor Hawthorne leaned forward in his chair, eyes dark with frustration, while Cornelia Blake stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, her emerald gaze flicking between Victor and the closed double doors. Inspector Mallard paced by the bay windows, each step sounding like a drumbeat, and Alfred Carter hovered silently by the door, his posture rigid as a sentry. I remained near Poirot, who reclined in his fauteuil with inscrutable calm, watching the shifting expressions of each suspect. Mise Amos, Poirot began, his voice soft but carrying across the room. We have seen how fear can drive one to desperate acts. Our young Imogen's devotion led her into folly, yet her error was born of love, not malice. Now we turn our attention to the deeper currents that threaten this household. He paused, letting the gravity of his words settle. It is in moments of duress that characters reveal their true colors. Victor sprang to his feet. I cannot bear this. First they accuse me with that glove, then they accuse Imogen with that lamp oil forgery. Who is to be blamed next? Have you found any proof against me, or do you simply delight in torturing the innocent? His cheeks were flushed, and he clasped the back of Lady Minerva's settee, as though to steady himself. Poirot's moustaches quivered, but he did not rise. Monsieur Hawthorne, your indignation is understandable, yet the truth is not malevolent, it awaits only discovery. I ask you to sit and reflect. He gestured, and Victor sank back into his chair, eyes flashing. Cornelia stepped forward. Perhaps Monsieur Hawthorne should thank you, Poirot, for unveiling Imogen's deceit. Were you not all too eager to condemn the maid, who merely acted out of loyalty? Her tone was measured, but each word cut like a blade. Poirot inclined his head in acknowledgment. Madame, loyalty can be admirable or dangerous, depending on the path chosen. Our task here is not to chastise motives, but to uncover intent. Loyalty blinded Imogen. Could it not also blind another? Cornelia's lip curled. Are you suggesting I, too, acted out of misplaced devotion? I stand vindicated by my own sorrow. My husband's death and the collapse of my business are proof enough of my suffering. She swept past Poirot and paced to the window, folding and unfolding her hands. Lady Minerva watched her eyes brimming with pity. I could almost hear the unspoken question in Minerva's gaze. Could I have misjudged her wrong? Inspector Mallard cleared his throat, raising his voice. Enough. We are not here to indulge theatrics. Someone murdered Lord St. Clair. Someone attempted to kill Imogen. The threads we once thought separate now weave together. I want statements clear, uninterrupted from each of you regarding your intentions last night. A hush descended. Poirot placed a steadying hand on the inspector's arm. Inspector, the time for confrontation has not yet come. Tensions must escalate until the suspect can no longer contain the pressure. Let us proceed with care. Mallard scowled but fell silent. Poirot turned to Lady Minerva. Madame, yesterday you spoke of your secret past and the fear of scandal. How do you bear the knowledge that your maid acted in your name? Lady Minerva's shoulders hunched. She rose, voice trembling. I bear it with shame. Imogen was like a daughter. She believed she could shield me, but I never asked her to end my husband's life. She paused, swallowing. My only wish was that he grant me mercy, not face death. Her confession hung in the air like a lament. Victor looked away, jaw clenched, as though shielding himself from a blow. Cornelia's eyes softened, but only briefly, before hardening. Again Poirot nodded. Mercy is a fragile plea, but if your maid's act stemmed from compassion, could another have been equally motivated by retribution? He fixed Victor with a gentle gaze. Monsieur Hawthorne, you discovered your debts in Lord St. Clair's journal debts that threatened your inheritance. Yet you insisted you reconciled with Madame Blake. Did you truly? Victor's face flamed. I tried. I sent word begging for leniency, but I was refused. I had no power to change his mind. He leaned back, fists clenched in his lap. I would never kill him, Poirot. He was my uncle. Cornelia's voice cut in. Yet you admitted you passed his window at night. You heard movement. You could have delivered a greater dose than the single petal's misdirection. Victor rose again, exasperated. I was not in his study. Why must you assume the worst of me? Cornelia stepped closer, lowering her voice. Because you have reason and opportunity to elements anyone with cunning could exploit. A sudden rap at the door startled us. Alfred Carter opened it to reveal the household solicitor, Mr. Steele, bearing a sheaf of papers. He bowed gravely. Forgive the intrusion, Inspector. These arrived by special courier at dawn and signed codicils to Lord St. Clair's will. A collective gasp rose. Poirot gestured for Steele to proceed. The solicitor laid the documents on a side table and spread them open. Here, Madame, is your codicil, he said, handing a page to Lady Minerva. She scanned it, breath-catching. The new will disinherited her, leaving the estate first to Victor, then to Charity. Lady Minerva's face went ashen. He would not do this, she whispered. Poirot picked up the next page. Monsieur Hawthorne, here is your codicil. Victor seized the paper. eyes widening as it granted him immediate control of the estate upon Lord St. Clair's death. Victor's lips trembled. He wanted to ease my debts. Poirot shook his head. Or he wished to bind you by obligation, Madame Blake. He directed the solicitor. Madame Blake, your codicil. She accepted the paper, which granted her a substantial portion of the estate's liquid assets, redirecting funds from a shared venture. A murmur rose among us. Monsieur Steele retrieved a final page, marked simply, Executor, Imogen Carter. Silence fell as we stared at the name. Imogen, the accused, was appointed executrix, a position of power and responsibility. Poirot laid the papers flat. This maze. Amos is our true pivot. The killer crafted false codicils, hoping to incite tension, to divert us with promises of wealth. The real codicil, the one penned by the deceased, remains hidden. He turned to Inspector Mallard. The person who created these forgeries is the one most intimately connected to Lord St. Clair's affairs, who stood to gain or lose by altering his final wishes. Victor sank into his chair, white-faced. Lady Minerva covered her mouth in shock. Cornelia's composure cracked, and Alfred Carter's eyes narrowed. Poirot rose, voice resonant. Mies Amos, the seeds of suspicion have been sown. Tomorrow's final gathering will see them blossom into truth. Until then, reflect on who among you had the knowledge of finances, the access to stationery, and the motive to reshape Lord St. Clair's legacy. He bowed, and as the solicitor collected the forged codicils, the household stood in stunned silence, each soul grappling with new revelations. Outside, the wind rustled through the ivy, as though impatience itself sought entry. The tensions had reached a fever pitch, and the killer, cornered by their own design, would soon make a fatal misstep. Chapter 12. The Confrontation. Late afternoon, Poirot summoned us once more to the Grand Salon, its tall windows now veiled by charcoal clouds drifting in from the moors. The air inside was tense, heavy with expectation. Lady Minerva stood near the fireplace, hands clasped at her waist, her lavender gown a stark contrast to the gathering gloom. Victor Hawthorne leaned against a mahogany console, eyes narrowed, while Cornelia Blake paced with measured steps, her emerald eyes cool and distant. Alfred Carter lingered by the door, arms folded, expression unreadable. Inspector Mallard and Dr. Penfold flanked Poirot at the centre, and I took my seat attentively beside him. Poirot raised a slender finger. Mies Amos, our investigation has traversed false leads, forgery, and attempted poisonings. Now we arrive at the decisive moment, the confrontation. I shall present my deductions, and through your responses, the truth will emerge. He paused, letting the silence gather like storm clouds. First, recall the gas lamp oil delivery forged on Lady Minerva's stationery. The watermark matched her orders, yet the flourish of the signature was identical to the sachet requisition. Who among you had the opportunity to borrow that stationery and access the chemist's paperwork? Cornelia's lips tightened. I did, when arranging my own correspondence with Lord St. Clair. I had occasion to consult Lady Minerva's writing desk. She met Poirot's gaze evenly, and yet Poirot continued. The delivery slip bears no date, stamp only the time. 2:17 a.m. How did the forger ensure the merchant would record time but omit date? This irregularity suggests familiarity with the chemist's habits. He turned to Dr. Penfold. Doctor, you frequented Fosmos and Vale in London during your medical studies, did you not? Dr. Penfold's face paled. I did, in my youth, but I haven't ordered supplies. From them in years, Poirot's moustaches quivered. Ah, but familiarity with their clerical quirks lingers. A simple phone call to request any-time delivery yields time notation without date. He inclined his head toward Cornelia. Madame, did you not call them yourself after midnight? Cornelia's hand quivered on a nearby chair. No. She broke off, eyes flickering. Poirot pressed on. And yet, your call records, obtained by Inspector Mallard, show a brief conversation at 12:05 a.m., followed by silence. He produced a slip of paper. Here it is, mise a misophone. Bill excerpt. Madame Blake, care to explain? Cornelia's composure cracked. She sank into a chair and ran a hand through her hair. I called only to confirm that Lord St. Clair's latest prescription had been filled. He had fallen ill earlier in the week. Poirot's eyes glinted. And did you mention lamp oil or any other household items? Cornelia hesitated, voice trembling. No, I did not. Poirot leaned forward. Yet the chemist's clerk recalls a second call 5 minutes later. To confirm special instructions. This call was placed from your own telephone extension. He paused, letting the accusation drift in the air. Explain this discrepancy. Victor spoke up, voice low but sharp. Monsieur Poirot, you have no proof that Cornelia's call procured that forged slip. Anyone could have spoofed the extension. Poirot shot Victor a measured glance. A clever theory, monsieur. Yet the merchant's clerk recognized the voice distinctive. Cultured, with a slight hesitation on the word delivery. A hesitation that matches your manner of speech, madame. Cornelia's eyes filled with tears. I panicked. I did not wish to harm him. I only wanted to delay his discovery of my financial ruin. Poirot rose gracefully. Mon Dieu, yes. But you went further. You forged his request, introduced poison with the oil, and staged the glove and petal clues to implicate another. He paused, turning to Alfred Carter. But if Cornelia was the orchestrator, why did the butler's own trowel bear arsenic residue? Carter's jaw clenched. I use that trowel daily in the greenhouse. Any soil I handle would contact it. Precisely, Poirot agreed. Yet the arsenic on the trowel blade matched pharmaceutical-grade poison, not garden arsenic. Only someone with medical connections could apply it so evenly. Who among us has such knowledge? He looked at Dr. Penfold, then at Imogen. Both recoiled. Poirot continued without pause. Imogen Carter, you observed the trowel's broken handle and borrowed it. Yet you denied this at first. He held her gaze. Why the deception? Imogen's breath caught. I did borrow it, monsieur. I thought to dig fresh lavender, to mislead, that was all. Yet you did more, Poirot persisted. You spiked Lady Minerva's tea and nearly succeeded in killing her. Imogen's eyes filled. I wanted only to scare the master, to delay his cruel plan. I never meant to murder. Poirot shook his head. Your confession is noble, but misguided. Still, your act does not explain the codicil forgeries, nor the glove torn to frame Victor. He turned back to Cornelia. Madame Blake, you had motive loss of business, scorned partnership, and opportunity. But you lacked the precise timing to administer the poison. Only one person knew the lamp oil delivery would give access at 2:17 a.m. Cornelia rose abruptly. And you, who else but your own husband's confidant would he trust to sign for such an order? Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Poirot gazed at Cornelia, then at Lady Minerva, whose face was ashen. At last, Poirot addressed, "Victor, Monsieur Hawthorne, you have sat quietly through these accusations. You have motive debts, inheritance, but no clear means, save passes by the study window. Yet you emerged untainted from the lamp oil and codicil schemes. Tell me, what did you overhear during your late-night stroll?" Victor swallowed. "I heard your voice, Monsieur Poirot, through the study keyhole. You spoke of evidence and conspiracies." He ran a trembling hand through his hair. "You said you would expose the killer tonight." Poirot's eyes softened. "Indeed, I planned this confrontation, but your eavesdropping revealed more. The name I would speak to condemn the murderer." He paused dramatically, then pointed to Cornelia. "Madame Blake, your duplicity is laid bare. Yet I sense a deeper fracture in accomplice, uneasy in silence." He turned to Alfred Carter. Carter met his gaze with steely calm. "I knew of the codicil alterations. I gave you the forged documents, Monsieur Poirot, because I believed you would protect Lady Minerva. I thought the true will could be presented later." Poirot nodded. "Yes, your loyalty led you astray. You assisted Cornelia in the documents, believing her plea of partnership. But once the maid's attempt failed, once suspicion turned to Victor, you withdrew. That is why you planted the glove and staged the petal." Cornelia sagged, tears streaming. I needed someone to help with the paperwork. You were the only one I could trust, Alfred." Alfred's face tightened. "I did not realize how far you would go." Poirot folded his hands. "Thus, we have our conspirators, Madame Blake, who forged the chemist's request, spiked the lamp oil with poison, and arranged the codicils, and Mr. Carter, who aided by forging documents and staging evidence. Imogen acted independently, driven by loyalty, and Victor was innocent of all but curiosity." A stunned hush enveloped us. Poirot allowed the weight of his revelation to settle. "Mies Amos, tomorrow at the final gathering, we shall confirm these truths before Inspector Mallard. For tonight, I retire to reflect on the final mechanics of this crime." He bowed, and the room remained frozen in shock. I sat, breathless. As the conspirators exchanged despairing glances, the house itself seeming to shiver under the burden of its secrets. The confrontation was complete and the truth lay poised to emerge in full at the grand reveal. Chapter 13. A desperate attempt to escape night had fallen in a velvet hush over Thorngate Hall when Poirot summoned me to join him in the conservatory. The glass panes were slick with mist, and gas lights beyond cast prismatic reflections on the curved foliage. "Hastings," he murmured, gloved hand raised as if feeling the dark air, "our conspirators grow desperate. One seeks to obliterate the last trace of guilt. We must watch well." He led me to a side alcove where the moonlight filtered faintly through dusty glass. Moments later, Inspector Mallard arrived, lantern in hand, followed by Dr. Penfold, whose calm was strained by urgency. Poirot laid out the forged codicils, the duplicates Cornelia and Carter had crafted on the authentic will, still missing. "These forgeries must be destroyed," he said. "I suspect an attempt tonight. Let us disperse and observe silently." We positioned ourselves strategically. Mallard near the corridor exit, Penfold by the servants' staircase, and Hastings with Poirot in the conservatory's heart. The suspects, unaware of our vigil, retired to their rooms or, so we believed at the stroke of midnight. Soft footsteps echoed. A slender form slipped through the doorway. Cornelia Blake, garbed in a simple wrap and carrying a small satchel. Her face was pale, eyes alight with panic. She hesitated at the threshold, glancing toward the distant servants' wing. Poirot leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. She goes for fire. The hearth in the billiard room, there she will burn evidence. He rose, signaling me. We followed silently as Cornelia crept across the polished floor, avoiding the scuffed runner. Mallard and Penfold emerged behind us, as silent as shadows. Cornelia reached the billiard room door and paused, pressing an ear to the panel. Hearing nothing, she slipped inside. There, the gleaming green baize table and low library lamps created a muted world of shadow and emerald. She advanced to the fireplace hearth, where the embers in the grate lay cold. Producing a small ledger from her satchel, she placed it upon the rug and pulled a match from its tin. A blue flame flickered, then licked the paper's edge. She dropped the match, and the ledger caught light. Poirot cleared his throat softly. Madame Blake, startled, Cornelia spun around, her hands scorched by the sudden heat. She snatched the ledger and tried to douse it with her sleeve, but the fire spread, crackling. "No, you can't stop me," she cried. Inspector Mallard strode forward. "Step away, madam, or I will apprehend you." Cornelia's eyes flicked to the satchel lying on the floor. She hurled it into the fire, and its condenser sheaf of papers burst into flame. With a gasp, she lunged for the window. The sash was heavy, but adrenaline lent her strength. She thrust it upward and swung out onto the narrow ledge. "By the window," Poirot exclaimed. "She intends to climb down the ivy." Below, the gardens were shrouded in mist, yet Cornelia had begun her descent. 1 foot on a low gargoyle, the other seeking a handhold. Mallard aimed his lantern. Penfold drew his sabre cane. Poirot moved with unexpected speed, intercepting her path. "Madame, halt," Poirot called softly. Cornelia froze, 1 foot on the ledge, her face etched with desperation. Poirot stepped onto the sill beside her, hand extended. "Come back inside. This will only end in injury or worse." For a heartbeat she wavered, the night breeze tugging at her wrap. Then she looked into Poirot's calm, unwavering eyes and, with a trembling sigh, placed her hand in his. He guided her back through the window, closing it gently behind them. Inspector Mallard was already securing her wrists with silk cuffs. Cornelia, shivering, sank to her knees before the dying hearth. "I had to destroy them," she sobbed. "Without those papers, no one can prove the will was forged." Poirot knelt beside her. "Madame, evidence cannot perish by flame when it resides within the mind of the investigator. You mistook desperation for ingenuity." He placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, though his eyes were sharp. "Tell me now, where did you hide the true will?" Cornelia looked up, ravaged by guilt. "I buried it in the rose garden, beneath the sundial. I thought mud and moonlight would conceal it." Poirot rose and signaled Mallard. "Take her inside and have her under guard. Hastings and I will retrieve the will before dawn breaks." As Cornelia was led away, I joined Poirot at the window. "She nearly succeeded in destroying all proof," I whispered. Poirot exhaled, gazing into the gloom. "She underestimated our vigilance and overestimated her solitude. Now, Hastings, we must recover the will's hiding place. Time is against us." Together, lantern in hand, we slipped into the night, the hall's silhouette looming above. The rose garden lay beyond a Rottian gate, its paths entwined with dew-laden petals. Poirot guided me to the sundial, a marble pillar whose gnomon cast a pale arc across the grass. He swept away fallen leaves and pressed his gloved knuckles against the moist earth. There, he murmured, as I spotted a slight mound. We dug swiftly with our hands, scattering soil. At last, the leather-bound will emerged, its clasp intact. I lifted it out, brushing dirt from its cover. Poirot smiled, a rare triumphant arc of his moustaches. "The tapestry is complete, Hastings. We have the final piece." He slipped the will into an inner pocket, shielded from moisture as we made our way back toward the house. The sky began to pale with approaching dawn. Within the hall's silent walls, a new day would bring the grand reveal where truth, courage, and justice would at last be reconciled. Cornelia's flight had failed, and with the authentic will secured, Poirot's little grey cells had triumphed. Over desperation, the final confrontation awaited. Chapter 14. The final piece falls into place. The morning air was crisp with autumn's first chill when Poirot and I reassembled the household in the oak-panelled library. The tall windows stood wide, admitting a shaft of pale sunlight that danced upon the spines of ancient tomes. The atmosphere was charged, each attendee aware that today would yield the truth. Lady Minerva sat poised on a leather chair, her lavender gown modest against the dark wood. Victor Hawthorne leaned against a bookshelf, arms folded, while Cornelia Blake and Alfred Carter stood near the hearth, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and resignation. Inspector Mallard and Dr. Penfold completed the circle, their faces grave. Poirot stood at the librarian's desk, upon which rested two documents, the authentic will, its leather cover bearing the St. Clair seal, and one of the forged codicils, singed at the edges where Cornelia had attempted to destroy it. He cleared his throat, moustaches quivering with quiet satisfaction. "Mise Amos." He began in his refined French cadence. "We have retrieved the final piece, Lord St. Clair's true testament, buried under the sundial at dawn. It is now time to compare intent with deed, and reveal how each strand of deceit wove together." He raised the authentic will. "This document names Lady Minerva as sole heir to Thorngate Hall, with provisions for Victor's debts and a bequest to a charitable trust of £1,000. No mention of Madame Blake, nor appointment of any executrix save myself as counsel." He inclined his head in mock humility. "It appears my services were valued by the late lord." Lady Minerva's eyes glistened. She exhaled, relief and sorrow mingling on her face. "He cared for me even in death," she whispered. "Indeed." Poirot agreed, then laid the genuine will aside and picked up the forged codicil. Contrastingly, these forgeries reallocating assets to Madame Blake and appointing Imogen Carter as executrix were crafted with precision yet flawed in provenance. He held the charred edges with tweezers. "Observe the watermark mismatch, the temporal gap in signatures, and the mismarked dates. But most telling is the paper, a blend of Cornelia's personal correspondence, stock, and Mr. Carter's notary sheets." He let the paper rest on the desk. "This evidence implicates two conspirators working in concert." Cornelia's composure faltered. She placed a hand to her throat. Victor surveyed her, conflicted between anger and pity. Alfred Carter's face was impassive, but his clenched jaw betrayed his involvement. Poirot turned to Alfred. "Mr. Carter, you admitted forging the codicils at Madame Blake's behest, yet you believed your loyalty would preserve Lady Minerva's honour. Can you explain why you facilitated these false documents?" Alfred drew a slow breath. "Madame Blake approached me, distraught over her ruined venture. She told me Lord St. Clair intended to disinherit us, both Victor and herself, and leave the estate to Lady Minerva unconditionally. She implored me to help her secure her future. His voice was steady, though sorrow lingered. I believed her claim, and I agreed to prepare the codicils, trusting that Poirot would later present the authentic will. Poirot inclined his head. Your loyalty was misdirected, monsieur. Your actions deepened the web of deceit, framing the innocent and enabling poisonings. Yet, true culpability rests with Madame Blake, who conceived the plan. He addressed Cornelia. Madame Blake, you had motive, financial ruin, wounded pride, and the promise of inheritance. You had means, access to Lady Minerva's stationery, familiarity with chemists, and a late-night call to the tradesman. And you seized the moment under the cover of lamp oil delivery. Cornelia bowed her head, tears slipping free. Yes, monsieur. Poirot, I wrote the letters, arranged the forged orders, and mixed the arsenic into the lamp oil. I thought no one would find the authentic will buried under a sundial at dawn. She raised her eyes, brimming with remorse. I never wished to kill him, only to delay his betrayal until I could salvage my affairs. But the poison was too strong. I did not anticipate, I did not intend murder. Poirot's eyes softened slightly. Intent is a fragile vestige in the face of death, madame. The law distinguishes between accident and design, and your design was deadly. He turned to Imogen Carter, who stood a short distance away, shoulders slumped but gaze unwavering. Imogen, you acted independently, misled by loyalty to protect Lady Minerva's reputation. Yet you attempted to poison your mistress with the same toxin and staged evidence to divert suspicion. What drove you to such a deed? The maid's voice was small but clear. I discovered Lord St. Clair had found proof of Lady Minerva's past. I feared he would destroy her unless I stopped him. I borrowed the gardener's trowel to plant fresh lavender petals and conceal the poison in her tea. I did not realize my actions would mirror those of someone else and lead to my uncle's death. She glanced at Cornelia. I did not know. She had her own plan. Poirot nodded. Two sets of intentions, one toxin, tangled threads of loyalty and ambition. Victor Hawthorne, you stood accused by a torn glove and stolen moments at the study window. What would you say to your uncles? Memory. Victor stepped forward, voice firm. I loved him, monsieur. I did not kill him. I eavesdropped, yes, but only to understand the depth of his intentions toward me. When I discovered the hatched plots, I meant to warn Lady Minerva. He looked at Cornelia and Mr. Carter. I did not want revenge, only clarity. Poirot smiled gently. And in your vigilance, you learned more of the human heart than of the criminal mind. He turned to Lady Minerva. Madame, I trust the truth brings you solace, though bittersweet. Lady Minerva rose, her posture dignified. It does. I pardon Imogen, for her love was blind, and Mr. Carter for his misplaced loyalty. As for Madame Blake, she paused, regal yet sorrowful. Justice must follow, though it breaks my heart. Poirot inclined his head in respect. Then let the law take its course. Inspector Mallard, you have heard the confessions and seen the evidence. I leave the outcome to your judgment. Inspector Mallard stepped forward, bowing to Lady Minerva. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I will ensure the proper proceedings are carried out. As Mallard signalled for constables to escort Cornelia and Imogen, and for Carter's arrest, Poirot turned to me, a subtle gleam in his eyes. Hastings, our work here is complete. The final piece has indeed fallen into place. I smiled, relief and admiration mingling in my chest. The intricate web had unraveled, each reveal a testament to Poirot's unerring logic. Outside, the mist lifted, revealing the silver dawn. Justice would be served, and Thorngate Hall, though scarred, would endure. Poirot's little grey cells had triumphed once more, bringing order from chaos, and light to the darkest of plots. Chapter 15. The final gathering that afternoon. The library's oppressive silence was broken only by the soft turning of book pages and the distant ticking of the grandfather clock. Poirot had instructed the household to present themselves at 4 o'clock sharp, each bearing a single memento from the crime. Lady Minerva with her grandmother's dried lavender pouch, Victor with the torn glove, Cornelia with the charred codicil, Imogen with the chipped teacup, and Alfred Carter with the trowel. Inspector Mallard and Dr. Penfold stood respectfully to one side, while I took my place beside Poirot at the head of the long reading desk beneath the great portrait of the first Baron St. Clair. Graduating from gloved repose to commanding presence, Poirot rose and spread his hands in welcome. "Mies Amos," he began, voice smooth as polished mahogany. "We have convened here for one final purpose, to reconstruct the crime in its entirety, allowing the truth to emerge from these fragments." He gestured first to Lady Minerva, who stepped forward with quiet dignity. Holding the lavender pouch aloft, she explained, "This belonged to my grandmother. It vanished 2 nights ago, and its absence, real or simulated, served as a symbolic warning." She lowered the pouch and returned to her place. Poirot nodded, then indicated Victor. Victor laid the torn leather glove on the desk. "I discovered this near the terrace steps," he said. "It was meant to implicate me by suggesting my presence in the garden after hours." He compressed his jaw but met Poirot's gaze without flinching. Poirot lifted the glove and turned it slowly. Observed the deliberate cut in the left thumb, designed to mimic wear-butt, inconsistent with Victor's usual pattern of use. He placed it down with care. Next, Cornelia approached with the scorched codicil. The paper's edges were fragile, the ink smeared in places. She set it beside the glove. "I attempted to destroy this to conceal the forged amendments I placed upon the estate's will." She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Poirot picked up the codicil carefully, showing the group the telltale watermark and irregular signature flourish. "The very sheet you tried to incinerate speaks of your ambition," he observed. Imogen then came forward, her face pale but determined, carrying the chipped teacup. She placed it on the desk. I offered Lady Minerva's tea to her mistress, hoping to delay my master's plans, but I used this cup. Poirot examined the chip, matching it to the dent in the study mantel where Minerva's cane once struck. "Used to deliver poison under the guise of hospitality," he remarked softly. Imogen bowed her head, tears glinting in her eyes, but held her composure. Finally, Alfred Carter lifted the broken trowel and set it down. Its handle was splintered, the blade still bearing traces of white powder. "I brought this from the greenhouse," he said. "I feared the gardener's suspicions." Poirot studied the blade under the library light, noting the pharmaceutical-grade arsenic residue, a tool repurposed for murder, disguised by dust. With the 5 artifacts arrayed before him, Poirot tapped the desktop gently. "Let us consider. The sequence first, the lamp oil order forged to create darkness in the study. Next, the arsenic introduced. Then, the petal and glove planted to mislead. Followed by the secondary attempt upon Imogen, and the codicil forgeries to fracture our focus. Each step was staged to baffle the mind and fracture the alignments within this household." He paced slowly before the group, energy gathering like storm clouds. Yet one more element remains: the authentic will, recovered at dawn from beneath the sundial. This definitive document contradicts the forgeries and crystallizes motive. Lady Minerva, you were to inherit all. Victor, you stood to gain only after her comfort. Cornelia, you stood to lose everything. Imogen, you believed yourself protector. And Alfred, you saw a means to save those you served. Each of you had cause, but only one had the nerve, the knowledge, and the precision. Poirot paused, letting the weight of his words settle upon them. Outside, the wind whispered through the ivy, as though nature itself leaned in to hear his next utterance. He raised a slender finger. The murderer is he or she who engineered each phase, yet concealed within a facade of loyalty or grief. They alone could orchestrate the lamp oil order in the dead of night, handle arsenic with expert care, forge codicils with intimate knowledge of family business, and manipulate suspicion toward others. A hush settled. I saw Lady Minerva's trembling hand hover over her pouch. Victor's fingers tightened on his leather glove's cuff. Cornelia's eyes brimmed with unshed tears. Imogen's chest rose and fell with rapid breaths. Alfred Carter's expression was stern, as though bracing for the thunderbolt. Poirot turned his gaze to each in turn. Madame, he said to Lady Minerva, you witnessed the destruction of Cornelia's codicil and protested against forgery. Yet you had no hand in drafting that deceit. He glanced to Victor. Monsieur, you overheard my consultations and sought to protect your inheritance, but you lacked the medical acuity to handle pure arsenic. He addressed Imogen. Mademoiselle Carter, your love dictated your act, but you were guided by another's plan. He fixed Alfred Carter with calm intensity. And you, Mr. Carter, provided the forgeries and arranged the staging. He paused before stepping to Cornelia. Madame Blake, you possessed the means, motive, and meticulousness. You alone could forge the orders, procure the poison, and engineer the codicils. Yet you needed an accomplice to assist with documents and stage the secondary misdirection. Cornelia's face crumpled as guilt overwhelmed her resolve. The air seemed to shudder. Victor and Lady Minerva glanced at each other, relief mingling with sorrow at her collapse. Alfred Carter lowered his gaze, shame staining his features. Imogen pressed a gloved hand to her lips, tears glinting. Poirot allowed the silence to fill the room, then spoke with finality. Madame Blake and Mr. Carter, step forward and acknowledge your roles. Inspector Mallard, who had stood motionless, advanced and placed a hand gently on Cornelia's shoulder. Madame Blake, you were under arrest for the murder of Lord St. Clair and the attempted murder of Imogen Carter, he intoned. And you, Mr. Carter, for your complicity. He produced cuffs, his voice restoring order. Cornelia rose, shoulders slumped, offering no resistance. Alfred Carter nodded slowly, accepting his fate. The household watched as two figures who once stood among them were led away. Poirot turned, then to Lady Minerva and Victor. This gathering, though painful, has purged the darkness that shadowed Thorngate Hall. The final reveal is complete. He offered his hand to Lady Minerva, who accepted it with trembling gratitude. As the prisoners were escorted out, a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the library in a moment of grace. I watched Poirot's resolute and felt the satisfaction of a mystery brought to justice. Mon ami, Poirot whispered to me, the tapestry is finished. Each thread has found its rightful place. I nodded, knowing that in the end, it was not only our little grey cells, but the courageous unwillingness to surrender to fear that saved Lady Minerva and restored order to Thorngate Hall. The final gathering had served its purpose. The truth had emerged, and with it, peace at last. Chapter 16. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall library windows, casting long shadows across the polished floorboards as Poirot stood before the assembled company. The hush that followed the final gathering was weighty, pregnant with expectation. Lady Minerva sat poised in her chair, her gaze steady despite the tumult of the past days. Victor Hawthorne leaned against a marble column, arms folded, relief and lingering tension warring in his expression. Inspector Mallard and Dr. Penfold stood respectfully to one side, and I remained at Poirot's elbow, eager to witness his masterful exposition. Poirot cleared his throat softly, his moustaches quivering with solemn purpose. Mies, Amos, we have examined tokens of deception, glove, petal, teacup, trowel, codicil, and the authentic will. We have unmasked the conspirators and secured the evidence. Yet now we must trace the precise sequence of actions that led to Lord St. Clair's death and nearly claimed another life. He paused, scanning the faces before him. Allow me, therefore, to reconstruct the crime, step by step. He took a small pointer and tapped the lamp oil invoice displayed on an easel. At approximately 12:05 a.m., Madame Blake telephoned Fosmos and Vale, requesting special delivery of lamp oil. A phrase she knew would prompt the clerk to note time but omit date. This created the pretext for entry into the study after hours, under the guise of replenishing Lord St. Clair's private lamp. The authentic order was created by forging Lady Minerva's stationery and signature flourish, copied from her sachet. Requisition. Thus, the study lamps were extinguished, replaced by the dim glow required for the murder. He turned to the chipped teacup on the desk. Coincident with the darkness, Cornelia Blake having secured access followed the butler's routine, offering Lady Minerva's tea to the butler's daughter, Imogen. Intending only to delay Lord St. Clair, she used this cup, knowing its chip would echo her earlier outburst in the study, creating a false linkage to Lady Minerva's alleged obsession with superstition. Unbeknownst to Cornelia, the teacup served a darker purpose later. Poirot moved to the broken trowel displayed atop a side table. Meanwhile, Mr. Carter, misled by Madame Blake's urgency and his own loyalty, retrieved this trowel from the greenhouse. In Cornelia's absence, he applied pharmaceutical-grade arsenic procured through his daughter's nurse contacts to the blade. His intent was to leave traces of poison in the potting soil, framing a gardener's accident or Lady Minerva meddling with the lavender. This same arsenic later appeared on the trowel's blade, implicating both gardener and maid. He gestured to the torn glove. Around 1:30 a.m., Cornelia returned to the study to carry out the final act. But to divert suspicion from herself, she cut a hole in the left thumb of Victor Hawthorne's glove, his glove stolen from his walking stick rack. She tossed the glove onto the terrace, where it mingled with fresh lavender pollen from the greenhouse, again pointing our attention toward Lady Minerva's heirloom and Victor's nocturnal wanderings. Poirot stepped closer to the dais on which the authentic will lay. At 2:17 a.m., the forged lamp oil delivery arrived. The courier, unaware of the deception, delivered to the study door. This was the moment. Under the pale lamp glow, Cornelia laced Lord St. Clair's eau de cologne with a fatal dose of arsenic, using a small glass vial procured from Dr. Penfold under the guise of medical necessity. The poison was masked by the fragrance's alcohol, base and slipped past the butler's notice, who assumed the missing stopper was an oversight. He paused thoughtfully. Unbeknownst to Cornelia, Imogen Cartered, riven by misguided loyalty, interred, moments later to confirm a knock she thought was Lady Minerva's call. Seeing the study door ajar and the lamp's dim light, she believed Lord St. Clair planning to ruin Lady Minerva. In panic, she attempted to administer a sublethal dose of arsenic via tea, using the chipped cup to incapacitate him. This secondary crime nearly claimed her mistress's life instead and served as yet another diversion. Poirot straightened, letting the full weight of the revelation settle. Thus, 2 poisonings, one fatal, one attempted. 2 perpetrators acting in concert and in error. Multiple staged clues intended to fracture our focus. Each step was calculated to implicate Lady Minerva or Victor, to conceal the true architects, Cornelia Blake, driven by desperation and ambition, and Alfred Carter, blinded by loyalty and complicit in forgery. He turned to Cornelia and Alfred. Madame Blake, your motive was clear: financial ruin and wounded pride. Mr. Carter, your motive was loyalty to your mistress and misguided faith in Madame Blake's plea. Yet you both underestimated the power of diligence and the acuity of Poirot's little grey cells. His eyes softened. Though you shaped each clue, you could not outwit the meticulous gathering of evidence and the unerring logic that binds it. Poirot bowed his head briefly in respect to Lord St. Clair's portrait above the mantel. The final piece, authentic will buried beneath the sundial by Monsieur Hastings and myself, provided the ultimate contradiction to the forgeries, exposing the truth in full. He faced the room again. Justice will now follow its course. But let this serve as a caution. Even the most intricate web of deceit can be unraveled by careful observation, by attention to detail, and by confidence in reason over fear. A solemn stillness enveloped the library. Lady Minerva rose, her voice steady though tinged with sorrow. Monsieur Poirot, you have saved my honour and revealed the deepest betrayals within these walls. I am forever in your debt. She turned to the constables. Take them away. Inspector Mallard stepped forward to place the cuffs on Cornelia and Alfred, who offered no resistance, their expressions marked by regret. As they were led from the room, Poirot produced a handkerchief and dabbed at his moustaches, his eyes reflecting both compassion and triumph. Finally, Poirot addressed me in a low voice. Hastings, the reveal is complete. We have seen how fear and greed can warp human hearts, yet also how loyalty to truth can redeem us all. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. Come, let us join Lady Minerva and Victor, for the tapestry is lifted, and the threads return to their rightful place. I closed my notebook, heart racing with admiration. In that moment, amidst the quiet triumph and the promise of justice, I knew I had witnessed once more the unrivaled brilliance of Hercule Poirot, bringing order to chaos and restoring peace. To Thorngate Hall. Chapter 17. Outcome and justice say week had passed since the autumn dawn revealed the hidden will, and Thorngate Hall had settled into an uneasy calm. The corridors, once hushed with suspicion, now echoed with the measured steps of a household striving to recover its equilibrium. The grand library, where revelations had fallen like thunderbolts, stood silent yet dignified, a testament to truth's triumph. In this room, Poirot and I gathered once more, flanked by Lady Minerva and Victor, while Inspector Mallard prepared to report on the legal outcomes. Monsieur Mallard cleared his throat and began. Thanks to Monsieur Poirot's meticulous investigation and witness statements, The Crown has charged Cornelia Blake with murder and attempted poisoning, and Alfred Carter with accessory before and after the fact. Both have entered pleas of guilty, acknowledging their roles in the forgery, the staging of evidence, and the administration of arsenic. He paused, eyes sweeping the room. Cornelia Blake has been sentenced to life imprisonment with eligibility for parole after 20 years. Alfred Carter, whose cooperation was instrumental in securing the evidence, will serve 10 years. Lady Minerva's hand tightened around the arm of her chair as she absorbed the verdict. Victor stood silent, head bowed, grief and relief etched upon his face. Poirot regarded Mallard with respectful approval. "Thank you, Inspector Poirot," said softly. "And what of Imogen Carter, whose misguided loyalty led her to attempt a lesser crime?" Mallard consulted his notes. Imogen was found to have acted without malice, believing she was protecting Lady Minerva. The Crown has opted for leniency. Imogen will be placed on probation and required to undergo counseling. She is also to receive medical supervision for her mental well-being. A wave of relief passed over the room at this news. Lady Minerva smiled through tears. "I shall continue to care for her as she has cared for me," she vowed. Dr. Penfold, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. "I will oversee Imogen's treatment, ensuring she recovers fully from both physical and emotional wounds." His tone was kind but firm, embodying duty tempered by compassion. Poirot inclined his head. "Compassion, Hastings, is as vital as justice. Without it, mercy would be but a hollow concept." I nodded, recalling how Imogen's love had nearly destroyed her. The law's mercy, guided by justice, allowed her a chance at redemption. Poirot turned then to Victor. "Monsieur Hawthorne, the estate now rests in your capable hands. Have you considered how you will honor your uncle's wishes and Lady Minerva's?" "Stewardship," Victor squared his shoulders, lifting his gaze. "I shall maintain Thorngate Hall as he intended, a sanctuary of family and charity. The debts he settled will be repaid, and the charitable bequest will grow. Lady Minerva will oversee the gardens and social functions, ensuring the hall remains a place of grace." Lady Minerva inclined her head. "And I shall assist. We will restore harmony and remember my dear husband with kindness rather than sorrow." Poirot smiled at this resolve. Harmony restored, justice served, and the hall endures. He paused, then addressed the assembled company. "Let us not forget that every action, every choice, carries consequence. The murderer's ambition brought ruin to 2 lives. The maid's loyalty nearly destroyed another. Yet through reason and compassion we have found a path to healing." Lady Minerva rose, her posture elegant despite the recent turmoil. "Monsieur Poirot, you have been our saviour in intellect and spirit. How can I ever repay you?" Poirot inclined his head with characteristic modesty. "Madame, seeing justice done is reward enough, but I cherish the moments of renewed friendship that follow resolution." He glanced at Victor, then at me. "And for my faithful friend Hastings, gratitude for your steadfast support." I offered him a warm smile. "It is always a privilege." "Monsieur," a gentle knock preceded the entrance of Imogen Carter, accompanied by Dr. Penfold. The maid's cheeks were flushed with hope, her bonnet held respectfully in her hands. She paused at the threshold, and Lady Minerva beckoned her forward. "Imogen," Lady Minerva said gently, "you shall remain here, with me, as part of this family." Your bravery, though misdirected, spoke of the deepest devotion. She embraced her maid, and I saw tears of reconciliation in Imogen's eyes. Poirot watched the reunion, his grey eyes soft. Compassion, Hastings, the final key. As afternoon light gilded the library, the household gathered in quiet fellowship. Lady Minerva proposed a toast. To memory and to hope may we remember the lessons learned, and look forward with hearts unburdened. Glasses were raised, some trembling, others steady, and the clink of crystal resonated like a promise. Later, as dusk settled over the hall, Poirot and I walked the terrace. The chrysanthemums bloomed defiantly against the darkening sky. Mon ami Poirot said, gazing at the fading sun, another case has found its conclusion. We have seen how ambition, loyalty, and fear intertwine, yet reason has triumphed. He inhaled deeply. Now, let us enjoy this peace before the next mystery beckons. I glanced back at the warm glow of the library windows. Indeed, monsieur, here at Thorngate Hall, justice and compassion have reunited a family. Poirot smiled, fingers lightly brushing the cold stone balustrade. Perfect harmony, Hastings. Until the next puzzle reveals itself, let us savor this victory. And with that, we turn toward the gathering dusk, content in the knowledge that once more order had been restored. Chapter 18. The closing remark. The late evening glow in the library softened the heavy mouldings and gilded spines of the shelves, casting the room in a gentle half-light. Lady Minerva sat beside the mantel, her hands clasped in her lap as she regarded the assembled small group. Victor Hawthorne, restored heir and devoted nephew. Imogen Carter, forgiven and treasured maid. Dr. Penfold, the steadfast physician. Inspector Mallard, the representative of justice. And Poirot himself, the architect of revelation. I stood at the threshold, notebook closed, heart full at the sight of harmony restored. Poirot rose, warranting immediate silence. His tall silhouette, framed by the fire's glow, bespoke both dignity and warmth. Mies, Amos, he began, voice suave yet resonant. Tonight we have reached the end of our journey. Each of you has borne witness to truth's unveiling and suffered its consequences. Yet in adversity, your true characters have emerged. He motioned first to Lady Minerva. Madame, your fortitude in the face of betrayal and sorrow honored. The memory of your late husband, your forgiveness of Imogen and Alfred Carter exemplifies the nobility befitting the Lady of Thorngate Hall. Lady Minerva inclined her head humbly, tears glistening, but there was pride in her straightened posture. Poirot turned to Victor. Monsieur Hawthorne, your patience under suspicion and your dedication to your uncle's wishes demonstrated a heart both courageous and just. You will safeguard this estate with the compassion he envisioned. Victor bowed his head in acknowledgement, gratitude and resolve in his eyes. He then addressed Dr. Penfold. Doctor, your steady hand saved Imogen's life, and your discretion protected Lady Minerva's dignity. Your presence has been a bomb in this storm. Dr. Penfold inclined his spectacles with a wry smile, meeting Poirot's gaze. Next, Poirot regarded Inspector Mallard. Inspector, your collaboration, though at times challenged, was crucial in translating deduction into justice. The law's purpose is served when it is tempered by reason. Mallard offered a firm nod, pride in his bearing. Finally, Poirot's gaze softened as he considered Imogen Carter. And you, Imogen, whose loyalty led you astray, yet whose remorse guided you back to the light. Your courage lies in acknowledging error and seeking redemption. Imogen's shoulders shook with emotion as she curtsied deeply. Poirot strode to the centre of the room and produced A small leather-bound notebook, Lord St. Clair's final journal, discovered by Hastings in a forgotten drawer. He held it aloft. Monsieur St. Clair's last written words bear testament to the love behind his stern exterior. Though shadows gather, loyalty and trust shall be the hallmarks of my legacy. Let truth endure beyond my passing. He laid the journal gently on the desk. He paused, allowing each word to settle. We have honored his wish. Truth has endured. Suspicion has been laid to rest. Harm has been undone where possible, and justice applied where necessary. A hush fell, then Lady Minerva rose, gloved hand resting upon the journal. I shall preserve his words, monsieur, and remind all who dwell here that our bonds must be stronger than our fears. Her voice was soft but unwavering. Poirot offered a final benediction. Mies Amos, the human heart is a vessel both fragile and resilient. It can harbor fear and ambition, but also compassion and forgiveness. Let this case remind us that though cleverness may stage deception, it is kindness and candor that ultimately triumph. He turned to me with a small flourish of his moustaches. Hastings, my dear friend, your steadfast support and keen observations have once again proven invaluable. I stepped forward, offering him my arm. It is always an honor, monsieur. As the great clock told 10, Poirot signaled that our gathering had ended. The company dispersed, some to their chambers for rest, others to the conservatory for reflective conversation. Lady Minerva pressed my hand in thanks before departing, her gown trailing softly across the Persian rug. Poirot and I lingered by the mantel, the fire's embers glowing bright. He tilted his head, eyes alight with satisfaction. Another mystery concluded. Hastings, the threads have been woven into order, and Thorngate Hall stands reborn. I gazed at the reflecting glass over the fireplace, seeing our silhouettes side by side. Peace has returned, monsieur. Thanks to you. He allowed himself a small, genuine smile. Peace, we, until the next riddle beckons. But for now, let us savor the harmony we have restored. He extended a gloved hand toward the French window leading to the terrace. Together we stepped into the gentle night, where the air carried the sweet scent of lavender, tribute to past sorrows transformed into hope. The moon cast a silver path through the garden, guiding us home, and as we walked side by side, I knew that wherever darkness gathers, Poirot's little grey cells will shine the light of truth and, in their own elegant way, kindness upon all who seek justice.